Hey, welcome back, everybody. My name is Dr. Keith McNally, of course, and this is the Question Guy podcast. I'm here with Jerry Klingerman, and I know I got that right because he just told me. And this is one of those conversations where I have no preview to. So, Jerry, let's jump right into the conversation. You just told me that you could talk about anything, and the past couple of years have been rather important to you as an individual. So let's go in and dive right in. First, tell us who you are, and then let's get into the conversation.
Yeah, sure. I am. I'm from Northeast Ohio originally. I recently moved to the Atlanta, Georgia area. I'm in a beautiful suburb called Kennesaw, which is one of the northwest suburbs. Lifelong Ohioan, now enjoying a nice warm spring down here. um, I'm 60 years old, and in the last couple of years, I've been through a total reboot of my life, I guess I would say. Um, in
That's
September of
60?
20. Yeah,
Isn't that
yeah.
kind of late for midlife crisis?
Well, I suppose it depends upon what you consider midlife at this point, you know.
Okay.
But yeah, yeah. Of course, the genesis of that, that I'm alluding to is I went through a divorce, actually, my second divorce. Kind of an interesting story. Um, it was a Sunday, and I had just finished doing some yard work and cleaning myself up. Came out of the bedroom into the kitchen, and my wife of 21 years motioned to me, and she said, "Sit down. We need to talk."
Whoa,
And of course,
whoa.
as every adult male over the age of 21 should know, when a woman says we need to talk, it means you need to listen. Let me explain to you what you've done wrong and what's going to happen. So
Ain't that the truth, right?
it totally is. Yeah, yeah. So I sat down and she began this well rehearsed speech, which I got to give her credit. It was well rehearsed and to the point, and it was kind of one of those Charlie Brown moments because after the initial introduction, all I kind of heard was wah wah wah, you know. But but the gist of it was it was a breakup speech, and the interesting part was that it was pretty much the same speech that I had been rehearsing in my head for a long time.
Hmm.
We had grown apart. There was no acrimony, and there's no alimony, thank goodness. um, but at the end of this conversation, or at the end of her
Monologue.
message,
Yeah.
yeah, monologue. There you go. She said to me, "Do you really want to stay together?" And I thought for a second, and I said, "No, I don't. I don't." So that began the process. Again, that was September of 2021. That began the process of us getting a dissolution and selling our home, a nice piece of land we had adjacent to it. Yeah, so um, I did a lot of thinking then
So
and
you
had
were
done.
prepared for
Go
this,
ahead.
though. It sounds like you were prepared, at least emotionally.
Yeah, it was just one of those things where, and I've talked to so many men about this, where you get so focused sometimes on raising your family that your relationship just absolutely takes a back seat.
Mhm.
And then when the kids are gone, you kind of look at each other and it's like,
Who are we?
what's left?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And ironically, our youngest daughter, I have two daughters, had left for college just like 2 or 3 weeks earlier. So I mean, the timing it's almost cliche, really. It's okay. The kids are out of the house, and
Right.
we just really moving forward into the next stage of our lives. I think we had both realized some years earlier that it wasn't going to include the other one. So
And so, in a sense, you were emotionally prepared, at least
yes,
for the idea of it's okay that we separate.
yeah, absolutely. And and I'm sure she would agree as well that in some respects it was a relief. I mean, actually, this was my second marriage, so second divorce, and I think anybody who's honest with themselves will tell you that no matter who initiates it, no matter what happens, a divorce is a loss.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, it's something that no matter how well you're able to move on, it's always there with you. And of course, we have two adult children, so we'll always have that connection. Um, but yeah, I was prepared for it. I was prepared for it, and clearly she was as well.
So that was the facilitator for change in your life, for good and bad, probably.
It was. One of the things, it's a really neat story actually. About 5 years ago, I was enjoying happy hour at a little town called Sugar Creek, Ohio, and we can talk about that in a minute. Sitting next to a buddy of mine that I actually had employed for a while, and we're enjoying a nice craft beer, and we got to talking as men do when they're enjoying each other's company over a beer or at a campfire or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, and I mentioned we were talking about retirement and that kind of stuff. I said, I want to travel. I said, but I'm just not sure that my wife shares that dream. And he did a really cool thing with me. He said, okay, imagine it's that time. He said, you're going somewhere. He says, now look next to you. Who's in the seat next to you? And it wasn't my wife. There was
Was it
there was
somebody?
nobody. No, it,
Oh,
it wasn't. There is
okay.
now. We'll get to
Okay.
that. um,
But
but
it
and,
could have
and
been
again,
like nobody, right? It could have been,
it
yeah.
was, and I definitely, I don't in any way want to disparage my wife. She's a good person. She's a great mother. She's a very good friend to people. It's just that as our marriage progressed, it was clear that we just didn't share the same goals.
Right.
So, when he said that, and when I metaphorically looked next to me and realized that seat was empty, that's when I really came to grips with the fact that, hey, this is probably not going to last the rest of your life. So,
And that's okay. Yeah.
yeah, and it was okay. So when everything took place, I took my portion of our settlement and I purchased a great big fifth wheel camper, and I was going to travel the country.
Oh my.
Which
So you were going to live the
yeah,
dream. You are going to live the
I was.
retirement dream.
I was going to be this vagabond writer dude, right? I call myself a career communicator. I'm a writer, editor, publisher. I have owned and launched several magazines. I've self-published a couple of books. So I thought, hey, what greater way to enjoy this lifestyle, this change and to embrace this new lifestyle.
Yeah.
And it worked for a while, but the reality of that situation is that I have my father is still living, and he's almost 92.
Mm, awesome.
And somewhere along this process, I began to realize that he was starting to have some issues. He it's a long story, but he found himself kind of alone and fending for himself at about age 84. And he did great. I mean, this is a man who had the traditional marriage experience where my mother, his wife, did all the cooking and his laundry and everything. So he literally, at age 84, learned how to do all that stuff.
Wow.
Well, yeah, and he did great for a while. But last year, let's see, what this is April. Yeah, I'm thinking it was last year about this time, probably. I started when I would visit him, I would notice that he hadn't eaten.
Mm.
And I'd look in his refrigerator, and the same food that was there the last time I visited was there. So I had to do some soul searching and realize that he needed me. So the RV is in storage right now.
Which is okay. Can I ask,
Yeah,
is his wife, your mom, deceased, or did they
she's
say?
gone. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. No, she's gone. We lost her about 3 years ago. She lived the last 10 years of her life with terrible dementia.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, she's gone, and that's part of what precipitated him moving actually from Florida back to Ohio and living on his own.
So all that you've told me so far is you've dealt with a great deal of loss so far. Mom, dad, well, dad's moved in, or
Dad is down here with me in Kennesaw,
okay.
which is cool. I see him at least once a week. He's doing much better. He's gained almost 20 pounds since, uh, yeah. So he's in a wonderful assisted living facility. We couldn't, it's 5 minutes from where I'm living. We couldn't have asked for more.
Good. And and both your daughters are away at college.
The oldest actually graduates next month from Cleveland State.
Okay.
She carried a 4.0 throughout college. She's graduating summa cum laude with a major in psychology and a minor in communications.
Uh, Taken after her dad at all?
Her dad may have had the potential to do that, but her dad grew up at the very end of the whole sex, drugs, and rock and roll area and did his best to keep that alive.
Well, we're about 5, 6 years difference, so I kind of
Okay.
appreciate some of that. So
Yeah.
what's up with you now? So lots of transition, but
Yeah.
now settled, hopefully, and
I am.
maybe looking for new aspirations because, like I said, if I'm 54 this year and you're a couple years ahead of me, you got to look for something that's positive now.
I have, and it's actually a great story. Back in January of 2022, well, I'll back up just a little bit. Last fall of 21, I was talking to a lifelong friend of mine that I hadn't talked to in a while, told him about divorce number two. And I mentioned to him, just kind of as an offhand remark, I said, it's too bad Stephanie's married. Stephanie is his sister, whom I dated when I was much, much younger. And there was a pause on the line. And he said, well, she's not married. She's been divorced for 3 years. And it was one of those like, you don't say, really. So his exact words to me were, would you like me to plant a seed? And
Hmm.
I said yes. And he reached out to his mother. His mother reached out to Stephanie. And there was another friend involved in a roundabout way, in like a 4 degrees of separation thing. She was provided my phone number. And then the first week of January, she reached out to me by text and we connected. We communicated by text for almost a month solid. And then there was the first phone call. And then there was the first visit. And let's just say that I got a lot of air miles and a lot of miles up and down I-75 from Ohio to Atlanta in the last year. So
So at even though we're kind of up in years and you feel like
yeah,
a kid again?
I do. I do. Yeah. Again, I want to caution that I don't want to say or imply anything negative about my second wife.
Oh,
It's just,
none at all.
we probably got married way too soon, and honestly, probably for some of the wrong reasons. I'm in a relationship now at age 60. I've never been in a relationship like this. I've never been happier. We are, I mean, at this point, we're planning to spend the rest of our lives together. Um, we're not getting married. There's none of that pressure.
Mhm.
And quite frankly, at our age, some of the traditional reasons that exist for people to get married, they don't really exist for us.
Right.
You know, we've made our commitment to each other. We each have our families. I'm living here in her home. She's got a couple of kids still here at home. We get along great. Um, yeah, but do I feel like a kid again? Yeah, I would say in some ways, and in some ways, I feel renewed, or new chapter, new chapter.
So maybe even a brand new book, because you even mentioned that you were an author. What are some of those chapters in the book? What's coming, down the line? There's a lots of 2023 left to go. What's going on this
Yes.
year?
Yeah, so like I explained earlier, I have a background in my degrees in journalism. I did manage to get my degree amidst all the smoke and the haze.
Good.
Um, I uh, I've worked in print publishing for a very long time. About 20 years ago, I got into creating and launching my own publications. In 2019, I've had some successes and I've had some failures. In 2019, I had a very spectacular failure. A magazine that I launched just didn't do well. The audience loved it, but we couldn't generate enough revenue. So that's when I kind of took a step back and said, okay, what's next here? Let's reinvent. Fast forward a couple of years, I had always kind of wanted to be a speaker. In fact, when I left the corporate world in '04, it was to become a speaker. But then I published my first book, and I got taken in a completely different direction. Well, last fall, I was at a large marketing event, and I encountered two people who approached me about becoming a speaker. And I was
How does
like,
that
okay,
happen?
this is right, yeah.
I'm trying to do the
It
same
was.
thing. Nobody's approaching me at all.
I can give you some names.
I appreciate
um,
that. I even got a
yeah.
book.
Oh my God,
I
you're
got my
right. Yeah.
first
Well,
book here too.
if your book is done, you should. Yeah, you're well on the way. I
Well,
mean,
now you
you're
got to
yeah.
teach me how the magic happens here.
You know, I after one of the general sessions, and this was in Orlando, Florida, a massive hotel. I went up at the end of the day, went up to the bar. It's like, hey, I'm going to blow the dust off a little bit, have a drink. And I love meeting people. I love meeting new people. I love talking with people. And I got into a conversation with a gentleman, told him about one of the things that I was working on, a program that I had written based on a book that I had written and never published. And he was like, "Oh, yeah, that's cool." And then then I explained to him about another idea that I had that is centered around men and what's happening and or happened to men in our society today. And after about three sentences, he said, "Come on, let's go have dinner. I want to buy you dinner." So, as it turns out, he is a speaking coach who also owns his own imprint,
What
and
is that?
he owns his own publishing company. Sorry,
Okay, sorry, thank you.
yeah. So I signed a deal with him to write a book, and the goal is to have the book become a bestseller. Which actually, there are a number of people out there who have models to do that. It's actually not that hard to become a best-selling author. Of course, behind that comes almost instant credibility. And our goal with the book is to um, uh, propel me onto stages, speaking events, and private coaching.
Yeah, that's exactly how it works. That's why I
Yeah,
said you
right.
got
Yeah,
the magic, and I need some of that magic
I hope.
dust.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, actually, just the other day, I ran across. I had somebody reach out to me via Facebook Messenger, and you know how that can go. And I will admit that she was an attractive woman. It's like, okay, here's another overseas woman who wants to be my friend, right? And as it turns out, she was quite legit, and she has a program very, very similar to what I'm following. So I can definitely give you her name as well.
I appreciate that. So, have you gotten on? Well, where are you with the book? One and
Yeah,
two.
yeah.
What's your first stage that you're going to talk on?
The first stage is unknown at this
Okay,
point. Yeah, what we're doing well, and we met, of course, on Cammy's Pod Power Hour.
right.
That is one of the first things, and that's happened organically for me. I had one of those 6 degrees of separation thing happen where somebody friended me, and we got to talking, and he said, "Oh, you need to connect with Cammy Lehman." I was like, "Oh, okay." Well, we got on a Zoom chat, and it was just like, it was like two old friends,
Yeah,
and
she
that,
can do that.
she can. Uh, so that's how I got involved with the Pod Power Hour. But
Cool.
that is one of the things that we've actually got kind of packaged or productized or whatever. Once the book is done, we'll be following the formula to try to get me on podcasts. And that was great advice on Cammy's part. Was I was thinking about starting my own, and she was like, "No, no, 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 no. Do not start your own podcast while you're in the middle of writing a book."
Right. I
So
don't know why
yeah,
not, but I'll trust her judgment.
yeah.
Because I did them too. So I got the Question Guy podcast, and I, you know, wrote the book all in with 2022. So,
Nice, nice, very
but
cool.
it took a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. Yeah.
So
So
what are your talks once you get on stage? What will your talks be about? Because you said you had this idea about men's situations. Can you expand upon that?
sure, yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about the genesis of it.
Okay.
As I guess as a journalist, sometimes we're not participants as much as we are observers. Okay, And one of the things that I've been observing for a number of years now, and it goes back to my age and the era in which I grew up. I was there. I mean, I was young, of course, a child, but I remember the birth of the modern feminism movement.
Hmm.
It was a good and necessary thing. Women fought very hard for rights they should have had all along, and they've made some remarkable achievements. In my field, I've actually worked with and for women virtually my entire 40-year career. It's just, second nature.
Right.
Um, but what I have observed happening is that the pendulum is kind of swung this way to the point where men are being marginalized. They're being ridiculed, actually, in some circles. And the younger you get, especially with younger men and boys, what's happening to them in terms of our society, lifting them up is simply not happening. It's just not happening,
Right. It's
and I
not.
think that's sad. And um, what I'm trying to do is to basically just stand up and say, hey, men are people too, and let's celebrate maleness as we do femaleness, if that makes sense. Um, so the working title of my book is Reclaiming Masculinity: How to Be a Man in the 21st Century.
Hmm.
And I don't at all approach it from any of the stereotypes that might be cast upon someone who's writing a book with that title. I'm simply laying out, what it means to be a man. Men and women are different, and um,
Well,
yeah,
as
we're
soon as you
different.
mention that, then, there's historically men are from Mars, women are from Venus. And
Right.
so I don't know if you're kind of picking up generationally those differences, or you're really kind of celebrating what it means to be a man. I mean, what does that look
Well,
like?
let's talk generationally, actually, because the first time I laid out this concept, I was at a private mastermind. I don't know if you ever heard of Catherine Jones from Utah.
The the name rings, but I have no connection.
Okay, she's a very successful internet marketer, and I attended an event that she held in Utah. I went out there separate occasions last year, and on one occasion, I happened to be the only man there. It was, people have differing schedules, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm in a room of about, I don't know, 8 or 10 millennial aged women. And it was on the plane ride out there that I was like, you know what? This is it. This is the program that I'm going to pursue, because I had something else completely that I was going to do. And I was like, no, I'm going to go back to ground zero and start with this, because this is what my heart is telling me. So at a certain point in this event, I laid out this concept of, what what it means to be a man. Let's rediscover this. Let's celebrate this. And again, it was all millennial aged women, and I was prepared for very strong backlash.
Right.
And not only did I not get any backlash, the overall response I received was, "Oh my gosh, yes, please do this."
So that tells me that women are of that age see some problems with men of their age.
They see a lot of problems, and probably the biggest revelation after the fact that millennial age women, by the way, and their mothers and their girlfriends want this program, is that it was kind of a revelation to me, honestly, that strong women want strong men. I had never really thought about that.
Hmm.
But they do, and that's another thing where I've gotten overwhelming. Like, yes, I want a strong man in my life. Um, so yeah, it's been an interesting process. I've talked to a lot of people, a lot of like elevator type conversations, and mostly women. And again, women from the millennial, roughly 30-ish, on up to women my age, 60-ish. And I have yet, I know it's coming at some point, but I have yet for anyone to say, "Oh, that's just a dumb idea, you misogynistic, blah blah blah." Quite the opposite has been my experience.
And for, I think for men's sake, I think we need to have that continued support from the opposite sex. And so,
We
mhm,
do. And support, that's a great segue, because one of the examples I've used with people in talking about men and communication, men unfortunately are taught to suppress their emotions, and I'm surprised to learn that that hasn't really changed. Men my age and perhaps yours as well can identify with the phrase, you better quit crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Men are taught to suppress their emotions. And the example that I use is, okay, let's say you've got a man, age 35. He's settled into his career, hopefully. He's probably settled into some type of committed relationship, where it's a wife or a girlfriend or whatever. And he kind of feels things slipping away, but doesn't know what to do. So at some point, he's sitting across from, let's say, his wife, and she's got tears in her eyes, leaning across, saying, "Why won't you talk to me?" And the answer is because
it
he
doesn't
doesn't
know
know
how.
how.
Yeah.
He doesn't know how. And the dovetail to that is that he doesn't feel safe doing that. So it's up to men and women to create a state where a man can truly feel like he can share, because a lot of them feel like they can't.
I got nothing to add. That was just fantastic.
Thank you.
Because it's much needed now. I think we are, with all that's going on in society. We've got war, we've got AI, we are becoming polarized. There are so many, we can point the fingers in so many different directions, and yet our humanity, I don't want to, really make this into a giant bubble, but it feels like our humanity is slipping away. I mean, literally, not just being a man and being a woman, but our humanity. And maybe, I'm kind of living in some very weird world, but it tends to feel that way sometimes. Especially now that a lot of my conversations are like this,
Right. Yeah.
virtual,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
and very
Yeah.
little, contact with anything or anybody. So I applaud everything that you're doing. I love it.
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
I would want to be a part of it. Um, Actually,
Fantastic.
this book, Walking the Path, was written about a young man. Uh, his name's
Okay.
John, and he's 17, 18 years old, and he has to learn how to find the world that he wants to belong to, because his world, his community, you know, has set expectations that he should become something, and he doesn't want to become that.
Mm,
And he has to find out where he fits in. And he's got a friend. Her name is Liz. And
okay.
she has really only trusted at his age, trusted companion. And so their dynamic, she's, I think, very much like your experience. She's wanting him to grow and mature and find himself. And throughout
Right.
the process of the book, he does. And so I
Awesome.
think that's really cool that,
Oh,
that mentality is here.
yeah, I'd love to read it. Go
Well,
ahead. Go ahead.
well, I was about to say it's been 30 minutes, and so
Oh, wow.
we've said
Okay.
a lot, and I think this conversation should be continued if you are willing to do that. But before we even make that commitment, let's go ahead and close out, but leave the men and women who are listening and watching this conversation, give them some hope that there is a better tomorrow, please.
There is a better tomorrow. I think, again, if I'm to look at the people whom I want to reach, and this is for everyone, every man, and his significant other of any age, I'm dialing in on that millennial generation because I see them as the ones that need it
Mm,
the most. But I think in a lot of ways they are much more open to these things than perhaps men of my generation. Certainly, much more than men of my father's generation. I think we are making lots of progress, and men realize and need to realize that, hey, in terms of relationships, it is all about communication, and I think they're open to that. And I think uh, I'm not the only one with this message. I think I have a little bit of a unique perspective on it, but thankfully, I see this message starting to get out there. So there's hope.
I like that. And I like the word hope. Jerry, this has been a fantastic conversation. Again, maybe offline we could talk about coming back and kind of finishing it. But until
Sure.
then, this has been another edition of the Question Guy podcast, and we thank you for joining us. Take care.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely.